ArchCON. My name is Patrick Crowley. I'm a professor of computer science at Washington University here in St. Louis, WashU as we call it. I'm also the founder and CTO of Observable Networks, a company I hope you all spend a lot of time thinking about. Thanks very much for being flexible and adjusting your schedule to join us today. It's my great pleasure to be able to introduce our next keynote speaker at this event. What we're going to hear Mr. Scheier talk about is, for me, really the highlight of this meeting when I heard that Paul was successful in getting Bruce to come. I was very excited, and as I know many of you are as well, because we all probably understand that in the world of information security, there's no voice that has greater reach than Bruce's. There's some people that are maybe starting to give him a run for his money, but when Bruce talks, people listen. He's got a very large platform. And so I think you all would agree with me that we're very fortunate to have the benefit of his presence here today to hear from him in person. A little bit about Bruce. Famous for crypto contributions, as you all know. He attended and was trained as a physicist at a university that's sort of near and dear to my heart, University of Rochester, an institution not too unlike my own institution, Washington University. He also has a master's degree in computer science. Notably, no formal training in mathematics, so far as I can tell, which is notable for such an accomplished and regarded cryptographer. Bruce is also an entrepreneur. He's a founder of Counterpane Security, which was acquired by BT, and so he has, for some years, been a big company guy, and has now recently gotten back into the startup game with Co3 Systems, a sponsor of this very conference, and there's a table, a very nice table, over in the room next door that I encourage you all to visit. So, without any further distraction, please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker, BruceSchneier.
Thank you. I actually would argue that physics is basically mathematics with boundary conditions. So you kind of get a math training when you do physics. You just can't help it. Thank you very much for being flexible. This is the result of a difference of opinion on when I was speaking. And I appreciate that you are more flexible than Delta Airlines is. So thank you for that. So I want to talk about incident response. I'm going to talk about it very generally and really think about how it works and how we can get it to work better. I'm really going to talk about 3 trends in the IT industry. Then I'm going to go through 4 pieces of social science, actually 4 from economics and then 1 from psychology. Talk a bit about the current state of incident response products and services, and then try to tie it all together with some systems theory from the US Air Force. So that's the lay of the land, and here we go. All right, some trends. When I think about IT, I think we're seeing a lot of changes, and changes really affect how we techies deal with the infrastructure. All right, first is that we're losing control of our IT infrastructure. And that's a result of 2 different things that are going on. The first is the rise of cloud computing. Right, cloud computing means that our data, our email, photos, calendars, address books, messages, documents, they're no longer on our computers. Right? They're on servers belonging to Google and Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and everybody else. Right? So cloud computing means good control of our data. And you're seeing this happen both large and small. Right? Individually, our data is all out in the cloud. Organizations, our data is moving out into the cloud. We're outsourcing applications, CRM systems, our email, often our entire networks to other companies. And what that means for security is that we have a lot of trouble affecting the security. Because we have no control over, we have no direct control over the infrastructure. And you can outsource your corporate email to Google and it works great. But you don't know what kind of security Google has. You can't make it better. You have to accept what they're doing. Now, for a lot of companies, that's a good deal. But for a lot, it might not be. But the loss of control is important. The second way we're losing control is that we're increasingly accessing our data through devices that we have much less control over. Right? iPhones, iPads, Android phones, Kindles, Chromebooks. And I have a lot less visibility into this device than I have on my computer. And I can't even write a file erasure program for this because I can't get access to memory. I can't run arbitrary software on this. I mean, assuming I don't jailbreak it, right? I mean, the normal person. And everything on this is approved by Apple. So I have a lot less control over these devices. And these are the devices that everyone in organizations are now using to access all that data in the cloud. And it's going to be computers too. Right? Look at Windows 8. Look at Apple's Yosemite. They're both looking more and more like phones. Right? They're trying to steer people towards the company store, towards much less control. Now, there's a lot of good reasons to do this, and I'm not saying these are bad trends. Right? As individuals, right? My mother gets way better performance by having Apple take care of her iPad than she had by having me take care of her Mac. Right? Organizations do a lot better. Right? I mean, outsourcing infrastructure is what we as society do, all through infrastructure. And IT is catching up with that. But when you outsource, you lose control. I think it's a really important trend for security because unlike everybody else, we actually want control. Trend 2. Attacks are getting more sophisticated. I mean, I think we're seeing a major jump in the sophistication of attackers in the last few years. And this is a variety of attackers, ranging from nation state on this end to bored teenagers on this end, and everybody in between. I mean, you see it when you hear the cyber war rhetoric. And I'm not, I tend not to like the cyber war rhetoric. And lots of people saying we're fighting a cyber war. But it's really, the real point that's important, it's not that we're fighting a cyber war, it's that we're increasingly seeing warlike tactics used in more broader cyber conflicts. Right? Technology basically broadly spreads capability, and these capabilities that 100 years ago you would have expected out of nation states, you get out of individuals and small groups. And this is important for incident response. Right? It used to be you could tell the attacker by the weaponry. And if we went outside and we saw a tank, we would know a government would be involved because only governments can afford tanks. And that shorthand doesn't work on the internet. Right? Everyone uses the same stuff. Right? You see a cyber attack, you don't know if it's state-sponsored, criminal, hobbyist, or anything in between. And a lot of this is the rise of the term advanced persistent threat, APT. I've kind of had a sort of relationship with that term. I used to hate it. I used to think it was just marketing. But I think I've come around. I think APT captures something really important about some of the attacks today. If you think about cyber attacks, you could classify them along two axes, right? Skill and focus. So a low-skill, low-focused attacker is a script kiddie, right? An opportunist. High-skill, low-focus, think of that as identity theft, zero-day exploits. Right? The attack against Home Depot last week. Right? Low-skill, high-focus, those are targeted attacks. High-skill, high-focus, that's APT. And the difference, the reason APT is important is that it's a difference between relative security and absolute security. Right? Against the attackers that attacked Home Depot or Target, right, your security is relative. Because those attackers were looking for credit card numbers, looking for information to commit fraud. They didn't need to target Target. They just happened to target Target. Should show a better example. Home Depot. Right? If Home Depot was more secure than other companies, the hackers would have gone after them instead. Security is relative. And that's most of what we do in our industry. Against APT, it's absolute security. Right? The Chinese hackers wanted the New York Times, because the New York Times had email from Taiwanese dissidents, and they needed that information. And against that sort of attacker, it doesn't actually matter if the New York Times security is more or less than the Wall Street Journal, because the attackers want it in there. And you know how it works, right? Right now, on the internet, attackers have the advantage. Right? You know, if anybody you know who does penetration testing, and they're good, you know they never fail not to get in. Right? Against a sufficiently funded, motivated, skilled APT, we cannot defend. And we have to deal with this. And I define this very general. I think this politically motivated hacking, where politics is very broadly defined, right? Nationalistic, ethical, religious, right? Attacks against big oil, big tobacco, big pharma by activists, companies people love to hate. Used to be Microsoft, now it's Google. Right? Politically charged energy, political candidates, U.S. elsewhere. And we're seeing a lot of these non-financially motivated attackers. And non-financially motivated tend to be targeted. Right? And a lot of this is called hacktivism. Some of it's IP theft. In the United States, I mean, lots of people talk about an enormous amount of IP theft going on that really doesn't get a lot of press attention. You know, also financially motivated hacking has gotten more sophisticated. The target attack was pretty sophisticated. Attack against people's photos and on iCloud was not. But we are seeing much more sophisticated attacks. And what's interesting is cybercrime has finally matured as an industry. And the entire supply chain is in place. Right, you know, thieves, fences, mules, it's all there. You can slot into your piece and make a profit. This is very big, this is very international. And this entire process from theft to monetization, very fast, very effective. That was trend 2. Trend 3 is the increasing government involvement in cyberspace. And right now we are seeing much more government involvement, you know, both for good and for bad, right? Both above board and surreptitiously. Right? The regulatory environment is getting much more complicated, both domestically and internationally. I remember listening to someone, it happened just the other day, I was talking to someone who used to be the CISO at a large infrastructure company. Talked about a major hack that he had about 2 years ago. And his biggest expense was calling a law firm to figure out what he had to do, given the data of people in all those states, all those countries. What are the rules? And that was surprising. That cost more than the forensics. And actually was more important to the corporation than the forensics. A lot more rules out there. We're seeing a lot more nation-state espionage and attack. This has been on the rise as our use of the internet has been on the rise. So we're seeing a lot more state-sponsored attacks against each other and against corporations. I remember earlier this year, the United States indicted in absentia 5 or 6 Chinese military officers for hacking into U.S. corporate networks, not military networks. Right, so there's direct attack. There's also a lot more collateral damage going on. You know, U.S. and Israel fired Stuxnet at Iran, and a bunch of other companies felt the effects. And we've seen examples of countries trying to take down YouTube or Twitter in their own country, affecting the entire internet. Some border gateway protocol stuff. I mean, there's a lot more collateral damage. And this isn't going to change. Right? More critical infrastructure means more government involvement. And eventually countries are going to say, hey, that stuff's important. DOD needs to defend it. And you hear rumblings in the US, you hear rumblings in other countries, that you need more government involvement because it is such an important and critical resource. And And right now, we are in the early years of a cyber arms race, and I don't think arms races end well. So I think we're going to see a lot more of governments coming into IT and either taking over things or making demands. I think it's going to be a real important trend moving forward. All right, those are my trends. Now I want to talk about economics. I have 4 concepts of economics that are relevant to the IT industry and IT security. And I give you these so you can understand what's going on out there when things seem to make no sense. There's a lot of behaviors in the IT industry that seem counterintuitive until you look at the economics involved. The first one is the notion of a network effect. And you've all heard of Moore's Law. There's a lesser-known law called Metcalfe's Law, which says that the volume of a network equals the square of the number of users. Right? The value of a network is the number of pairwise connections. And intuitively, this makes sense. Right? One fax machine is boring. Well, actually, one fax machine is useless. 2 are boring. 1,000 are interesting. 1,000,000 change the world. Right? As networks get bigger, they get more valuable. Right? The more of you that are on Twitter, the better it is for me to be on Twitter. So phones, email, SMS, Skype, Facebook users, any of these networks get more value as they get bigger. It's also somewhat true for virtual networks. Right? You know, Windows versus Mac users, iOS versus Android users. If one is much bigger than the other, it's a more attractive platform for everybody else. Right? There's more peripherals, there's more software, there are more cool stuff, there are user groups, there are websites. You know, if you're going to join one of the 2 networks, you're more likely to pick the bigger one. Right, so what network effects mean in IT is that you tend to have a market with a single dominant player. Right, the big naturally get bigger, the small naturally fall away. And a great example is look at social networking sites. I mean, 10 years ago, there were dozens of them. You know, now there's Facebook. And the exceptions are very specialized, like in China. Because it makes sense to join the big one. Right? Or Skype, or you know, all of these examples. Second piece of IT economics is the notion of fixed costs versus marginal costs. In the production of anything, there are 2 basic types of costs. There's the design cost to design the thing in general, and there's a cost to make one. And that's different depending on what it is. For some stuff, you know, a house, almost all the cost is the cost of making the one thing. For something like a Disney movie, all the cost is up front, and the cost of stamping out the DVD is basically free. And so different industries have a different ratio of fixed cost versus marginal cost. And in IT, pretty much everything is in fixed cost, right? The first copy of Windows costs, I'm making this up, $20 million, the second copy is free. Right? What this means is you need to figure out ways to recover development costs. Right? Normally, you don't worry too much about that because they're not that high. But if all the cost is front-loaded, it means a competitor can come in and make copies of your thing, and you lose the ability to recover your fixed costs. Right? Go to Hong Kong, buy DVDs on the street. That's the way that market works. Right? They're selling them to the cost of making the disc. Right? Or go out on the internet and get them for free. And so what this means is companies have to add barriers to competition. Basically things that break the standard market model in an attempt to recover fixed costs. Right? Just think of patents, think of copyrights. And that's what those all do. And breaking those is an enormously powerful attack. And this explains the movie industry, the music industry, also the pharmaceutical industry, which is a physical industry that has this problem as well. That pretty much all the costs are front-loaded. Right? In other cases, these high fixed costs become a barrier to competition. I mean, once one company maps the entire planet, it's kind of hard for someone else to do the same thing. Right? And then vendors can now play games and cut costs dramatically to remove competition. The third piece of IT economics is the notion of switching costs. Switching costs in economics is the cost of switching from a product to its competitor. Right? Normally, switching costs are very low. Right? I drink a Coke today, I don't like it, I drink a Pepsi tomorrow. No big deal. Sometimes they're high. Right? I use my cell phone today, I don't like AT&T, probably get AT&T tomorrow. And what this means is, actually, let me do it the other way. In IT, switching costs can be high for a bunch of reasons, right? It means, you think of it as normal application software. Retraining staff, rewriting applications, converting data. Right? It can be expensive to switch if you switch operating systems. You know how this works. Where you switch any major software you use. Now, I still use Eudora because I'm terrified of switching to any other email program. Because I know it's going to be very, very expensive. And I have 20 years to keep an email out of it. I have to make it work somehow. But the effect of this is that the higher the switching costs, the more a company can piss you off before you switch. Right? I mean, if I don't like the way Coke tastes, I'm drinking something else. But AT&T has to really piss me off before I go to Verizon. Because it's a royal pain. Right? And companies like keeping switching costs high for that very reason. If you remember the debate in the mid-90s about cell phone number portability, all the companies said, and basically before then, when you changed cell phone companies, you had to change your cell phone number. Right? And that had the effect of keeping switching costs high. You had to tell everybody else, you had to reprint business cards. It was really expensive to switch. And all cell phone companies fought the law requiring people to take cell phone numbers with them when they left. Why? Because that could have kept those switching costs high. And companies spend a lot of time trying to make switching costs high. Right? Proprietary file formats, non-compatible accessories, not letting you take your data with you. I mean, go try switching from Kindle to Nook. Right? Try taking your books without breaking data protection. Or switching from iTunes to something else. Or going from game machine, what to another game machine. And there's a reason all that stuff is incompatible, and that's to keep switching costs high. Fourth piece of economics, which is actually very directly related to security, is the notion of a lemons market. This actually is really interesting work. The economist named George Akerlof got a Nobel Prize for this. And he's studying markets with asymmetric information in buyer and seller. Basically markets where the seller knows a lot more about the product than the buyer. The market he's looking at for his quintessential example was a used car market. And in his thought experiment, you imagine a small town with a single used car dealer who's selling 50 cars at $2,000 each and 50 lemons at $1,000 each. In that market, the equilibrium price for cars is $1,500, right in the middle. And at that price, all the lemons sell and none of the good cars sell. What he observed, and he did it theoretically and also experimentally and observationally, is that in a market where the seller knows more about the products than the buyer, bad products drive good products out of the market. Right? Because the buyer can't tell the difference. This is security. I'll hold up two, encryption products. They use the same algorithm, the same protocol, same buzzwords. One is secure and one isn't. You have no idea which. Right? And you don't. And this fundamentally explains the firewall market. In the early 90s, there were hundreds of firewalls. The best ones didn't win. Fast forward 7, 8 years, there were about 50 or so IDSs. The best ones didn't win. And you see that again and again. IT security is a lemons market. And interesting, in lemons markets, buyers tend to rely on what economists call signals, other ways to figure out whether the product's good or not. In the used car market, a common signal is a warranty. Take the car, take it home, drive for a month, you don't like it, bring it back. It lets you know you're not buying a lemon. In our industry, signals are certifications, reviews. You ever wonder why companies chase those really dumb awards? This is why. Because they are signals. They let people know they're not, making a mistake. Right? Back in the 60s, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. That was the slogan. That was the signal. All right, now I know on one piece of psychology. I want to talk about prospect theory. And I think I'm going to explain why it's very hard for you to get security sold to your boss. So basically, this is actually the people who did this also won a Nobel Prize. There were psychologists who won a Nobel Prize in economics, which kind of scared everybody. So neat. The ultimate field is called loss aversion or framing effects. The basic experiment in prospect theory looks like this. You divide a room in half, and you ask half of the room to choose between $1,000, give you the money, or a coin flip at $2,000. Right? Expected value is the same. Basic question is, are you a gambler or not? And when you give people that choice, about 3/4 of the room will take $1,000. Right? Bird of the hand beats two in the bush. You ask this room a very similar question. I either will take $1,000 from you right now, right? You lose the money, or coin flip at losing $2,000. Right? Pretty much the exact same question. One is a gain, one is a loss. But this side, about 3/4 will take the coin flip. So basically, what we learned, this is an extraordinarily robust result, is that we are risk averse when it comes to gains and risk seeking when it comes to losses. And lots of explanations about this. It has been done across cultures, ages, big money, small money. Some group did it actually with, $1,000, large amounts of money. Other groups went to tribes in the middle of nowhere where a little bit of money was worth a lot of money. You see this behavior in other primate species, non-human. And the best explanation I have heard comes from evolutionary psychology. But if you imagine a species living at the edge of survival, as species tend to do, a small gain means you live to see tomorrow. Coin flipping at a larger gain means you might die. So when it comes to a gain, take the small gain. On the other hand, a small loss means you're dead. A coin flip means half of you are going to live. Right? So the bias makes evolutionary sense, but it carries through to today. And what this means is security is really a hard sell. Because security is a trade-off between a guaranteed small loss, buy the product, buy the service, hire the guy, or the risky larger loss, right? You'll get whacked. And you know this. You go to your boss and say, we really need this security product. And he says, well, you didn't have it last month and you were okay. So why do you need it this month? Maybe we'll take the chance. This exact same thing you see in the life insurance business, the burglar alarm business. It doesn't mean these things don't sell, but it means you're overcoming a bias. All right, how does this all affect incident response? So I've said for, I guess, like a decade and a half now that security is a combination of protection, detection, and response. Right? And we need response because protection and detection aren't perfect. We need it today more than ever for a bunch of reasons. Right? We've lost control of our computing environment. Attacks are getting more sophisticated. We're increasingly pawns in other people's fights. And companies inherently underinvest in protection and detection. Another thing I used to say back in the 90s was that security is a process, not a product. And I meant that very strategically. And that you can't just buy something and forget about it, that it's a process of continuous evaluation. But tactically, security is both a product and a process, or you need both to make it work. And really, to to spread it out more, it's people, process, and technology. And that was a phrase I used in the early 2000s. What's changing, right, people, process, technology, is the ratio. And this, I think, is interesting. Right? Conventional wisdom is that people generally don't help with security. The more you can remove them from the system, the better you are. I have a quote from Lori Faith Craner. She's a sort of usability guru at Carnegie Mellon. And she writes, whenever possible, secure system designers should find ways of keeping humans out of the loop. And we kind of all agree with that. That humans are the biggest security risk. And we've been doing pretty well at keeping people out of the loop. And our successes tend to be successes where people aren't involved. Right? In entirely automated prevention systems. Automatic update, which has been a phenomenal thing for end-user computers. Right? Get people out of the business of saying, yes, I want to update. Happen automatically. Get people secure. And we tend to like that stuff. But here's the thing about response. You actually can't fully automate it. Right? As you move from protection to detection to response, the people-to-technology ratio goes up. Right? Protection's a lot easier to automate than responses. Why? All attacks are different, all networks are different, all security environments are different, all organizations are different. Right? The regulatory environment's different, the political and economic considerations are different, the PR considerations are different, and those are often more important than the tech. So this affects the economics of security. Right? A lot of those economic problems are different because incident response products and services are different. Because everything is so unique to an individual, you get less network effects. Your marginal costs are higher related to your fixed costs. Your switching costs are lower. There's less of a lemons market. And what this means, and I think this is exciting, is that better products and services will do better. That unlike the rest of IT security, it's not a race to average. It's a race to better. And there's much less of a first mover advantage. There are far fewer natural monopolies. And I think for us industry, that's a really good thing. Right, so people, process, and technology. The key here is getting this to scale, right? Making this work on a large scale. And Lori Craner's, this is a sentence she wrote after the sentence I read. She wrote, however, there are some tasks for which feasible or cost-effective alternatives to humans are not available. In these cases, systems designers should engineer their systems to support the humans in the loop and maximize their chances of performing their security-critical functions successfully. That when you have people, when you need people, technology needs to make them more effective. I think of any emergency response system. Think of police, think of medical, fire, military. Right? Technology augments the people. And in IT/IR, we need technology that aids people. Right? Not the other way around. Not airport security, where the people aid the technology. It's not what you want. It's not going to work here. And the goal here is resilience. And we need our systems to be resilient. Resilience is a whole lot of aspects, right? It's mitigation, survivability, recoverability, adaptability. Kind of think of it as the Y requirements. And this is all about feedback loops. Now, this gets me to my last point. There's a concept from the U.S. Air Force called OODA loops, and I actually recommend people look this up. It's very interesting. OODA stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, Act, and it's a feedback loop. And it was originally thought of conceptually for aircraft pilots in dogfights. That this cycle of Observe, Orient, Decide, Act is what pilots are constantly going through. And the researcher, his name is Boyd, postulated that if you break up the pilot's what the pilot's doing into these tasks and try to speed up each task, you're making it more effective. And if your OODA loop is faster than your adversary's OODA loop, you are going to be more effective in this battle. Right? This continual process of collecting, evaluating, and acting on information. Since this came out, it's been applied to all sorts of real-time, this is the key, real-time adversarial situations. So airplane dogfights was the first, but you see it talking about strategic military planning, business competition, lots of places. And you see it talked about in IT as well. Right? And so this is an iterative process. And you go through this again and again. And if you do incident response, so you do anything real time, you can think of it this way. Right? And the key point is to get inside your adversary's loop, to be able to execute your loop faster than he can. So what this means and what I want are good incident response tools for all aspects of the OODA loop, and to make incident response more effective. Right? We need tools that facilitate all of these things. We need tools that help us observe, right? Knowing what's happening on a network in real time. Right? Any kind of real-time threat detection information systems. And all that stuff is real valuable, kind of IDSs or log monitors or sort of anything like that. Network data, performance data, network management tools, tools to put that all in one console, right? Maybe any physical security, sort of everything. Tools to orient, because understanding requires context. There's a lot of different contexts. What's happening inside the organization? What's happening on the internet? Right? Is there a new piece of malware out there? Is there a new geopolitical thing happening? Right? Is the company undergoing a merger? Right? Has something new opened up, a new partnership? And all this requires information, right? From the news, from intelligence feeds to the rest of the organization, right? To orient what's going on, right? Decide, figure out what to do. Surprisingly little exists here in IT to help people decide on what to do. Right? Who has the power to decide? How do they decide? Who approves? How does he approve? How do we make sure that happens? Right? How do we make sure everything we do is justified, approved, auditable? Because it's all important. And then act. How do you get to do the things? This also is hard, because especially in security, incident response, the stuff you have to do probably goes outside your normal permissions. Right? Because you're now in weird, non-normal time. You're in the world of don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness. Right? Have access to everything, and then justify what you did. Because otherwise you can't move fast enough. So we need tools for all these things. Right? We need tools that are powerful, flexible, intuitive. A lot of the people involved in these parts of the OODA loop are not going to be IT people. It's going to be executives, it's going to be lawyers, it's going to be PR people. It's going to be people outside organizations, you're going to pull in forensics teams who now have to be involved.